Welcome back everyone to another reaction video. Well, you all know my love for study of the First World War. Got an entire shelf dedicated to books on the First World War behind me, plus a whole bunch more sitting around that I'm doing research on, like this one that's sitting right here called Stolen Lives. Getting ready for a trip to the Somme in a few months. But I saw that Things I Care About, who is rapidly approaching that magic 100,000 subscriber mark, which gets you one of these right here. Looks like that'll happen fairly soon. Looks like about a week ago he came out with a video called What Caused World War I? Simplified Part 1. We know these days there are a lot of channels that are, what's the word I'm looking for here? Inspired by other channels, and Things I Care About definitely takes their inspiration from Oversimplified. So this should be interesting. I'll put the link down in the description so you can check it out without my commentary. I don't know how much he's going to cover in this. I know he's not American, and in the past we've had some concerns about maybe a heavy anti-American bias, but everybody's biased, and so I'm not going to let someone's bias keep me from enjoying their video and using it as an opportunity to dive into some history. So, and American bias shouldn't matter in this one anyway. So with all of that in mind, let's go ahead and dive into this one. But before we do, I want to give a shout out and a thank you to Jacob in Palermo, Maine, who signed up about a month ago as a patron. Thank you so much, and welcome to all of our new patrons and members who have been signing up lately. A big reason why I am able to keep this channel going is because of your support, so thank you for that. Let's dive in.
See, honey? The visit to Sarajevo has been great, and you were losing your head over...
Is that Tim from Drawn of History? That sure as heck sounds like Drawn of History. That's definitely not the guy from this channel.
The Habsburgs!
Yup, that's me. I bet you're wondering how I got here.
So just a couple quick things about the assassination. So Sophie is his wife, and she was Czech, I believe. But it was a morganatic marriage. It was basically, Franz Ferdinand is the nephew of the emperor, the Kaiser, Franz Joseph. Franz Joseph's only son had died in a murder-suicide with his lover, and Franz Joseph's wife had been assassinated. She'd been stabbed to death, and so he had no children, and so his nephew was heir to the throne, and as heir to the throne, he'd married beneath him. And so the agreement in order to be able to marry Sophie was that their children could not inherit the throne, and they had children. So after him, then it was going to pass to someone else anyway. Otherwise, it would have been Franz Ferdinand's child who became the emperor in 1916 when Franz Joseph died. But Sophie was actually shot as well. And when you see the car, if you go to Vienna, and I actually have a video coming from the museum that'll be going up on Stories of the Great War shortly. You can actually see the bullet hole from the bullet that hit Sophie in the car, and then the bullet that killed Franz Ferdinand actually went right through his collar, a tiny bullet hole.
Believe me, you will never look at World War I the same again.
Yeah, that's definitely Tim. Unmistakable voice. Speaking of, I just recorded some stuff. I don't want to give anything too much away, but it's pretty awesome who I'm interacting with in the next Drawn of History video. You'll like it.
In 1864, Otto von Bismarck beat Denmark, then kicked Austria's butt in 1866 to show them who's boss.
And these are all important, and of course, we talk about this all the time, but where do you start when you're trying to tell a story? For a lot of people, the story of World War I is the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, but well, that only happens because of the events that precede it. And no matter where you start, you could argue, well, we should start the story before that. So we could start with the formation of the German Empire, which things like the Schleswig-Holstein War, the Austro-Prussian War, the Franco-Prussian War are all a part of that. But then you could go back farther and you could talk about the Congress of Vienna and the Napoleonic Wars before that, and the 7 Years' War, and the American Revolution, and the French Revolution. It's all connected.
The Habsburgs of Austria were so weakened by the defeat that they were forced to compromise with Hungarian elites and form the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary. He then baited the French into declaring war, unified the German states, and quickly beat them too. even taking Alsace and Lorraine.
And this is all huge because this is a radical shift in the balance of power in Europe. 100 years before this, Prussia is just emerging as a power, as a great power. And now, not only Prussia, but Saxony and all of these other regional monarchies that exist in what is now the German Empire. This is a massive, massive shift. And for a long time, France has been kind of the great power in Central and Western Europe, but not anymore.
He then humiliated the French by making Wilhelm I Kaiser of a unified Germany in the Hall of Mirrors of the Palace of Versailles. Germany was now the second most populous country in Europe, behind only Russia. Its army was regarded as the best trained.
Right, they have the best trained army. They have a higher population now than France, but more than that, they've got a good power base from which to start building industrially.
And it was rapidly becoming the undisputed economic and industrial
There you
powerhouse of Europe.
That's key.
Germany now officially had a seat at the big boy table. Sitting there was also Britain, which was the world's leading economy and had enjoyed the privilege of having the world's most powerful navy for centuries. Being an island allowed them to keep a distance from many of Europe's affairs. But they now had so many colonies that they struggled to maintain them. Then there was France. For a long time, it was France and Britain who were the leading European powers. But now France was weakened by the recent war with Germany and was bitter.
And, you know, we might look at this and think, well, what's the big deal? Like, okay, now there's another great power. Well, you've been a great power, so why are you threatened by this? Well, when you're in charge, when you have the power, when you are the boss and you have largely been able to dictate your own fate, so to speak, you don't like it when somebody else comes along who's able to do the same thing and maybe threatens your supremacy. We had the U.S. and the Soviet Union for a long time kind of fighting for that, and then when the Soviet Union dissolved and the U.S. was kind of the lone superpower, if you're the U.S., you're like, I like being the lone superpower. I don't like the idea that there's an emerging China or that Russia's coming back, and now there's all these competing interests again. And so if you're France, if you're the U.K., you like it that way. You don't need this upstart Germany coming along and telling you things are going to be different.
How bitter, you ask? Well, textbooks in French schools refer to the treaty that ended the war as a truce, not a peace. Prussian was basically a slur, and each year, the graduating class of the Army's cavalry school visited the border to see the slope they would charge down when the war finally broke out.
This is really important to understanding the mindset in all this, because we always think of Germany as this warring military power that wanted to dominate the world, and I think a lot of our thoughts on Germany are seen through the lens of World War II, and it's important to understand that the Germany of 1900 and 1910, while ambitious and wanting to be a world power, is not the Germany of 1939.
The French did calm down eventually, knowing they couldn't afford another war, but kept the motto, neither war nor renunciation. Russia was desperately trying to catch up with industrialization and was facing huge internal pressure as its people were being all woke and trying to not be slaves or some
Being all woke and trying not to be slaves. Russia's got major internal crises that it's dealing with. So does the Ottoman Empire, for that matter. Russia's trying to build and strengthen, but simultaneously dealing with that. Whereas the Ottoman Empire is really just falling apart from the inside out.
Thing like that. Political assassinations were rampant, and the brutal Tsar often cracked down and killed anyone he saw as opposition. The Ottoman and the Austro-Hungarian empires were the two sick old dudes at the table. Once mighty empires, they were crumbling, and
I don't think Austria was quite as weak as the Ottomans were at that point. I think Austria's issue is the nature of its empire being so multicultural and multi-ethnic, multi-religion and multi-language that it was just really hard to hold that together.
Desperate to avert their impending doom. In 1890, Germany decided to make nationalist pride a key part of education, and its military soon commanded absolute respect inside Germany. How much respect, you ask? Well, in 1906, an ex-convict managed to steal a captain's military uniform and then ordered some random soldiers to follow him in the name of the Kaiser. They arrested the burgomaster and treasurer of the small town of Köpenick just outside Berlin. The ex-convict stole the town's money and ran away, leaving the soldiers to occupy the town hall. The mayor did not complain and sent a telegram to the military authorities to ask what to say to his citizens and know when the town hall would be available again.
That's crazy.
Anyways, Germany was not happy to just sit at the table. It wanted more.
Yeah, but it wanted what it saw France and especially the UK already having. So I'm not necessarily going to blame Germany for being as ambitious as her fellow European powers.
Everyone else had a bunch of colonies that were making them filthy rich and powerful. And Germany deserved some too. Wait, there's a question.
And this is the same mindset that the United States is going to start having around this time, when the U.S. is going to start building its navy, and it's going to be looking at Hawaii, and then eventually the Philippines and Puerto Rico and Guam and other places.
In the back, why did everyone have so many colonies? Great question, Mr. Viewer. No, ladies and only gentlemen, let me introduce to you the steam engine. Unlimited power to automate your industries. What do you think?
Are you guys thinking the same thing I am?
I think so.
Okay. At the count of 3, let's all say what we're thinking, okay? 1, 2, 3. Get
Let's
coal
go,
mines!
What?
I said what I said.
That's
Child
Tim
labor
again.
rules.
Wait. No. It was a joke. Please stop that. Stop doing that. The children don't actually...
See, this is what bothers me about his channel. I mentioned at the beginning about the anti-American bias. There was no reason to put that in there. I'm not saying that there isn't a place to talk about these things. Okay, yeah, let's talk about stuff going on. But to just throw a diss at the United States over child labor in the middle of a discussion about the 1890s in Africa and the European powers going after that, it just... It was unnecessary, and it just really doesn't add to this particular conversation.
Yearn for the mines. European economies were long comprised of mostly small and middle enterprises competing against each other in a relatively free market. But the new technological developments from the Industrial Revolution made commodity production much more efficient and productive. And it also made it more sophisticated and expensive, creating a higher barrier of entry. Larger enterprises developed economies of scale, giving them enormous advantages over smaller ones, who became unable to compete and were either absorbed or simply went bankrupt.
Kind of how it is now.
To optimize production, enterprises strived for vertical integration. In the United States, Carnegie Steel controlled every step of steel manufacturing, from mining to distribution. They owned mines, railways, and factories, and eliminated the need for any external intermediaries. It often used its massive size to lower prices below profitable margins.
Again, I'm not sure if I get needing to give an example, but aren't there examples from Europe? Because we're talking about how France and the British and the Germans gobbled up Africa, and how that led to tension that helped create the circumstances for World War I. So I'm not sure why we use an example of Carnegie Steel, which is like in Pennsylvania, to talk about that.
To bankrupt its smaller competitors, and then bought them for cheap. Carnegie Steel eventually controlled 25% of American steel production. Similar things occurred in the US with the General Electric and Standard Oil. Industrial operations were now so massive and complex that they required enormous loans to build or expand. So banks became increasingly important. And soon they even began to combine with industries. In Germany, Deutsche Bank and Dresdner Bank both owned a large portion of the coal and steel industries.
Yep.
While in the US, JP Morgan ended up buying Carnegie Steel and several competitors to form US Steel, which controlled about 2/3 of the country's steel production. Industries were now incredibly efficient. Too efficient. They were now producing more than what people could consume, creating a surplus that brought prices down. Wait, but that's good. Well, yes, if you're a dirty, poor worker. But for shark-minded, freedom-loving, child labor-enjoying coal barons, this was terrible news, as lower prices meant less profit. So large enterprises aggressively drove smaller ones out of business to avoid competition. But even that was eventually not enough. So they decided to find new markets for their products. And on the way, hopefully also some cheap raw materials and cheap labor, since strong worker and socialist movements made it almost impossible to reduce wages or increase working hours at home.
Right.
This was also great for banks, who were looking for new ways to invest their excess capital. And this is where imperialism came in. The European superpowers carved up the remaining uncolonized nations in Africa and Asia, and did ungodly things to them. Before the British came to India, it had a mixed economy system and was one of the world's largest textile exporters. A typical family grew rice and cotton, consumed what they needed, and sold any surplus in local markets to buy what they required. But when the British took over, they destroyed many Indian factories, heavily taxed those that remained, and even mutilated countless skilled workers to ensure they couldn't compete with the British companies. They then replaced food crops like rice, lentils, or wheat with money crops like cotton, indigo, opium, and tea.
And yeah, the same thing happened in the United States, where the cash crops like cotton and tobacco were where it was at, instead of being subsistence farmers making money, making food just to survive.
Into a large drop in food production. To survive, the now impoverished farmers had to take on debt to the British and eventually sell their land to pay it off. The British built infrastructure like railways across the country, but not for public use, rather to facilitate the export of goods. By the end of British colonial rule, India was left impoverished and underdeveloped, with at least 50 million dead directly related to their brutal rule. The French arrived in Algeria in 1830, expropriated the most fertile lands, and gave it to European colonizers. They replaced the local wheat and barley crops with wine production for French exports, forcing Algerians to work under semi-slavery conditions and leaving the country in a constant state of underdevelopment. By 1875, the French had likely killed over 800,000 Algerians. In 1884, Germany came to Namibia. They stole massive swaths of land and displaced the locals. When they tried to resist, the German government ordered to exterminate the Herero people in what was likely the first genocide of the 20th century. They then built concentration camps where thousands of Namibians would die from starvation or forced labor. By 1908, Germany had killed 80% of the Herero and 50% of the Nama people. The survivors were enslaved and forced to work in German mines or plantations.
So I haven't made a lot of comments during all of this because honestly it's just not a topic I know enough about to either say, yeah, that is exactly what happened, or to push back in any ways. Obviously, I think anybody who even has a casual understanding of history knows that the European colonization of Africa was terrible for Africans. It was terrible for the native populations in those places. There's no getting around that. It's absolutely being exploited for the European powers. And it does, well, maybe it's not the direct cause of World War I. It does play a role in how all of this goes down and how the tensions are built for European powers.
But Belgium's occupation of the Congo was
The worst.
especially horrifying.
Yeah.
Private companies were given control of large portions of the country to extract cheap rubber and make massive profits. These industries enslaved millions of Congolese and forced them to work until death. Workers who refused to work could be whipped or killed, and the companies often took their families hostage to ensure compliance. Villages that refused or resisted were simply wiped out. Failure to comply with rubber quotas was punished with death. This led to a complete collapse of the existing Congolese economic system and cultural life. Their farming system collapsed shortly after, causing horrible famines. While we don't know exactly how many were killed, it was likely several million. Stories like these were rampant across the colonized world. But uncolonized territories soon ran out, so the only way to continue to expand was to take land from each other.
And that's where the tie-in then comes to the larger picture of what's happening. Really, the bottom line is that World War I is caused by competing interests that eventually run into each other because there's only so many resources, there's only so much land, there's only so many ships you can build, so much territory that you can control, and eventually you're going to be putting an eye on the other people. And so you have the scramble for resources, you have the competing naval arms race between the British and the Germans, you have competing desire for land, like with the and you have the fighting that's going on in the Balkans, where the Ottoman Empire is going to be losing some territory. You have people wanting self-governance, places like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, where people don't want to be part of that empire.
Italy and France quarreled over Tunis. The Russian Empire spread and clashed with the British in Central Asia and Afghanistan. The US and Britain clashed over Venezuela's claims over British Guyana, and the French annexed Madagascar in 1896. The British took over Egypt in 1882 during the Urabi Revolt, which made the French mad since they saw Egypt as a part of their sphere of influence since the days of Napoleon. France demanded colonies elsewhere as compensation, with Morocco and Sudan as attractive possibilities. The French wanted to expand their territories to the east, while Britain wanted to do the same to the south. Their armies came face to face at Fashoda. French and British soldiers enjoyed a nice glass of champagne while they waited for their governments to decide if they wanted war. But in the end, the French simply went home.
See, this is a great microcosm of how life is, right? These soldiers don't have anything against each other. It's only when their government tells them you need to fight each other that they become enemies. And that's why we see things like in 1914, the Christmas truces that break out. These people don't hate each other, at least not yet. Now, 4 years of war and death and hardship and seeing what the enemy does to your buddy and what you've done to your enemy's buddy hardens people. But man's natural state is not to hate people he doesn't know.
Russia and Austro-Hungary had incompatible interests in the Balkans. Austria-Hungary couldn't tolerate an enlarged Serbia or Bulgaria, which could block the empire's trading routes to Constantinople or the Aegean ports. Successful independent Balkan states could also encourage nationalists inside the empire.
Yep.
It also feared that the Balkan states could gravitate toward Russia and create a formidable coalition.
Because there are religious and ethnic and even language ties between Russia and these states. Many of them are Slavic, and so that is, of course, going to be the issue.
In 1878, after the Russo-Turkish War, the Congress of Berlin decided, among other things, that Austria-Hungary would control Bosnia and Herzegovina, although it remained under control of the Ottoman Empire. So to avoid conflict, Russia and Austria-Hungary agreed in 1897 not to interfere in the internal affairs of the Balkan states. With everyone so power-hungry, a good alliance could be the difference between life and death. In 1879, Germany and Austria-Hungary signed a defensive treaty. The Germans saw it as a way of preventing Austria from going crazy in the Balkans and causing a war with Russia.
And remember, they had just fought a war themselves a decade earlier, and now they're friends. You know, they're still, again, there's these ties in terms of religion. They're both largely Catholic states, though there's a sizable Muslim population in parts of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and sizable Protestant population in the German Empire. But they have a lot more in common than they do with other nations, and so it's a natural ally to have.
While Austria-Hungary wanted to show that it was still relevant and that its existence provided stability. In 1882, Italy joined and they became the Triple Alliance, which was renewed in 1912.
Keep that in mind, because that's 2 years before the start of the war, the Triple Alliance. Where's Italy when the war starts? Well, again, the same issues that we're talking about that lead people to conflict are going to lead Italy to make a different choice.
The Germans at one point had an informal alliance with the Russians, but the relations soured when Russians imposed a tax on foreign owners of a state in Russia, and Germany retaliated by banning the buying of Russian stocks, which denied the Russians money they desperately needed for industrialization. French bankers quickly jumped in to fill this void, and Russia realized that an alliance with the French would make Germany less likely to interfere in a war with Austria over the Balkans. In 1894, they formalized their alliance, agreeing that if France was attacked by Germany or by Italy with German support, Russia would attack Germany with all its might. And if Germany attacked Russia, France would attack Germany.
And in theory, this should keep Germany in check, right? Germany can take on any one of these other major powers and probably win, and win easily. But taking on both of you at the same time, different story. And then once you add the British Navy into it,
Britain realized that they should probably team up too. I clashed with you over territories. I clashed with you over territories. Good enough, I guess. An alliance between Britain and Germany made a lot of sense in theory. Emperor Wilhelm was the grandson of Queen Victoria.
her eldest grandchild, in fact.
Germany was a land power, Britain a naval one. Germany was interested in Europe, Britain overseas.
Honestly, if Germany and the UK had teamed up as an alliance, they could have dominated the planet. I mean, seriously. The best army in the world, the best navy in the world, their combined resources and influence and population and intelligence and industry, gosh, no limit.
And both had a common enemy in France. Russia and Britain had even fought side by side to defeat Napoleon.
What if we team up?
Wait, I gotta see what that all
Napoleon.
said really quickly on the screen.
What?
Joseph Chamberlain, British Colonial Secretary. What if we team up? Bernard von Bülow, German Foreign
What
Secretary.
if we
Okay.
team up?
I don't know. You've been declining for a while, and we are only getting stronger.
Wait, is this Neville Chamberlain's dad? I mean, his dad was, I know, at one time mayor of Birmingham. Yeah, Joseph Chamberlain, that was him.
It looks like you need us more than we need you. Your glorious queen just died, and you just got your butt handed to you during most of the Boer Wars.
Wait, did you actually send South Africans a congratulatory message for repelling one of our attacks?
Yeah,
Tim again.
but what you did to the Afrikaners was kinda messed up.
You did way worse during the Franco-Prussian War.
Like Frederick the Great said, anyone who dares to criticize the German army will find he was biting on granite.
What I have said, I have said. I withdraw nothing. I defend nothing. I do not want to give lessons to a foreign minister, and I will not accept any at his hands. The dream of a British-German alliance is dead.
The Chamberlains were not so good at foreign policy.
Without European allies, the British looked to Japan as an ally in the Far East and signed an alliance. The Russian-French alliance meant that Germany would likely have to fight a two-front war. So General Schlieffen came up with a plan to quickly defeat France and then turn to Russia before they could mobilize.
And this is based in part on their past experience, Germany with France, in the Franco-Prussian War, where they pretty much stomped France in a couple of months in that war, and they expected they'd be able to do it again.
But there was little coordination between the German military and the navy. While the military prepared for this two-front war, the navy prepared for a war against Britain. If we want to be a real colonial empire, we need a strong navy. So we got two options. We can either build a bunch of light ships and submarines to raid the enemy economy, or we can build what's basically a transformer. Now, let me walk you through the pros and cons.
Kaiser Wilhelm.
I personally think we should go for a fleet of light ships. Build me a fleet of transformers.
Yeah, it basically becomes a naval arms race, and there was no way they were ever going to be able to keep up with the British, though they built what's really a very strong second best navy in the world.
How do we pay for it, though? I don't know, maybe we can buy votes from the Conservative Party. They're from the agrarian sector, right? Okay, if you conservatives vote for our massive and borderline responsible Navy budget bill, I promise I will put massive tariffs on Canada and Mexico. What? Oh, I meant Russia.
Again, I get his disdain for the United States, but there's no reason to drop that stuff in there at that point.
They get mad at us? They're already mad at us for seizing Kiachao Bay in China. How much more mad can they get? The German plan assumed three things. That Britain would not notice them building a massive navy. That if they did, they wouldn't be able to outbuild them because they were short on money, and that they wouldn't be able to make any friends. And they were wrong about all three of them. When the British found out, they were really uncomfortable. For them, the Navy wasn't just a sword to control the world, it was also a shield. If they ever lost supremacy of the sea, their island could become dependent on whoever controlled it.
100% right. I mean, look at the Napoleonic Wars and World War I in particular. Those are two times that a massively powerful land force. In Napoleonic Wars, it was France. In World War I, it's Germany. Probably would have won the war if not for the Royal Navy. Royal Navy single-handedly, I mean, not single-handedly, but is one of the primary reasons why Napoleon failed. It's one of the primary reasons why Germany ended up losing World War I.
Wait, isn't that what we are doing to others, though? Shut up! With the foreign policy skills of an edgy Twitter user, Germany had alienated most of its potential allies and was stuck with the declining Austro-Hungarian Empire and Italy, which was weak militarily and at odds with Austria-Hungary, so it was barely reliable. The Ottoman Empire was another possible ally, but also in severe decline as it was nearly bankrupt, with foreign interests holding most of its debt. The people were restive and the administration was incompetent and corrupt. It had also been steadily losing territory. France took Algeria and Tunis, while Britain took Egypt and Cyprus. Greece, Serbia, Romania and Bulgaria all soon obtained independence. Everyone knew that it was a matter of time until the Ottoman Empire collapsed. And once it did, its territories would be up for grabs.
Yep. All right, I guess that's where we're gonna. Thank you to Drawn of History. There you go for voicing several characters. Very cool. I was not expecting that at all, so that's awesome. So I expressed how I felt about certain parts of it, but largely it was a good job of presenting some of the build-up, and obviously we're gonna get into the closer build-up parts right up to 1914 in the next part. So we'll take a look at that when the time comes. Check out the link in the description. That'll give you a little more information on his other videos that you want to check out. Just head to the channel there and do that. Thanks for watching.